Hello everyone, what's up? My name is Joe and welcome to my channel. I'm here to teach you guys about Paragon, give you tips and tricks, give you some gameplay, hopefully make you better players, and just have a good time in general. This video is going to be all about wards. What wards are and how or where to put them is basically what I'm going to be covering. So if you think you're a pro at warding, you don't need to watch this video. But if you think, hey, maybe I want to learn some new warding spots, then go ahead and stick around because I'll be getting into all of that. First thing, for new players, if you don't know what Paragon is or any kind of MOBA, like what a ward is, wards are basically devices in-game that give you and your allies vision in a certain area around the ward. Paragon is a little bit different because instead of the wards giving line of sight vision, they give vision in an entire radius around the ward. So they can see over walls or through walls technically. They can see around corners, things like that. Whereas in other MOBAs like League of Legends or Smite, if you place a ward down, it can't see around walls and corners or over walls and corners and stuff like that. So in Paragon, there's two types of wards. There's the basic one you start with, the Scout's ward. Everyone gets this along with the Brawler's ward, the Magus ward, and the Lord's ward, but I'll get to those in a second. The Scout's ward is a 1-point card that lets you place a vision ward, not a stealth ward, a vision ward, that to reveal the surrounding area for 3 minutes. You get one charge, and that charge refreshes every time you go back to base, or you die. You start off automatically with Brawler's ward, Magus ward, and Lord's ward. So as you level up a little bit, you'll get these unlocked free, just like the Scout's ward, when you are able to make starter decks, your own custom decks, you know? The other ones, Guardian's ward, Sage's ward, Assassin's ward, and Sorcerer's ward, which right now are the only other wards in the game, these all have to be unlocked either by completing weekly quests, earning them through leveling up via card packs, or buying card packs. They all have their own different stats, and sometimes they'll have unique upgrade bonuses, but they all basically do the same thing. Wards are something you don't really need to focus on upgrading right away. You can save them towards the end of your build. Now that you know what wards are, I'm going to go ahead and jump into a solo versus AI game. And I'm going to be playing the hero Kalari. She's an assassin who can also enter the shadow plane. And I'll show you guys all the spots I like to use when I ward, depending on which lane or part of the jungle I'm in. And we're going to use this awesome skin, Red Death Kalari, because it looks really freaking cool. And if you kind of look at it, like the different color palettes on her shoulders and torso and all that, kind of reminds you of the Colossal Titan a bit from Attack on Titan, doesn't it? Now, before I get into ward locations, let me show you guys the visual difference that's represented between Scout's wards and Shadow wards. Scout's wards are little metal triangles that look like that, and you can see the little vision bubble. That's the vision they grant. This is what they look like up close. Then Shadow wards look exactly the same, except they have that little cloaking appearance to them. And just like Kalari, she can go invisible or enter the shadow plane, and she also has that same cloaking effect. So normally, someone who isn't in the shadow plane wouldn't even be able to see the shadow ward. It would be like it's not even there. But since I can see my own wards, I can see it. So just pretend that it's not there, and that's basically what the enemy sees, if that makes sense. And remember, Shadow wards, you get 2 charges. Scout wards, you only get 1. So make sure to go back to base whenever you need wards and whenever you need to spend card points. Now let's move on to where to ward. We'll start in the left lane and make our way to the right lane. So for left lane, it's pretty simple. You got this shadow pad here and this little intersection where all the different jungle paths meet. You can put one in this tree here or on the other tree. And if you're high up enough, you can actually put it on the side of that rock face there. What you can also do is put it in this little pathway to give yourself a little bit of extra time to see enemy junglers coming. It gives you a pretty good vision radius, but it doesn't show you the enemy's shadow pool here, so you won't see them if they're just sitting there waiting for you to push up and overextend. If you want to see into the shadow pool or any shadow pool, you're going to have to use shadow wards. So for this one, you're going to have to put the ward further into the enemy jungle. You can see the blue line that's just on the other side of the shadow pool. That indicates how far the ward can see. Alternatively, you can just put the ward inside the shadow pool. This creates the effect that the pool doesn't even work. So this is what you would basically see if you're the enemy walking through a shadow pool that is warded by the enemy. It disappears, the light disappears, and you are completely visible. Plus, if you're the enemy, you can't see the ward placed by you because it is technically in the shadow plane, and you are not, because the shadow pool does not work any longer. Scout wards, however, do not have that effect. They will be invisible while you're outside of the shadow pool, but as soon as the enemy enters the shadow pool, they will be able to see the scout's ward and then kill it. Now let's move on to the middle lane. So for the middle lane, there's actually two sides you need to worry about warding. They both have this intersection on the side of the lane that you can get through to the jungle. And it's basically the same thing. You need to ward the paths that lead from the jungle to the middle lane. You can do this by placing it on the ground or by placing it on one of these rocks that you're seeing here on the side. You can actually put the ward on top of the rocks, meaning melee heroes who don't have any range on their auto attacks won't be able to hit the wards even if they can see them with their own shadow wards. So this is a really good spot right here. You can also do it on the middle rock right there in case you're afraid of ganks from the right side of the map instead of from the enemy jungle. As for the other side, let me head over there really quickly and I'll show you guys, because this one's actually pretty cool. You got these two trees right here, right? And these, oh, hold on. Okay, hold on. Go away, go away. Thank you, making this very unprofessional. Anyways, you have these two trees right here. You can put wards in those trees. It's a lot easier to do it from these little ledges that stick out from the middle lane. Oh, hold on, he's low. Let me get some revenge real quick. Come here. Come here. You're not going anywhere. Come here. Come on. Almost dead. He's like 2 hits. Okay. Okay, now I'm like 2 hits. Hold on. Hold on. Just leave me alone. Nope. Made it. Oh, yes. No. Okay. That didn't happen. Anyways, like I was saying, you can do it by standing on these ledges that stick out from the middle lane and put the wards in the trees that way. It's a lot easier. It's also kind of hard sometimes for people to hit the wards because of the branches. They might get in the way. Some heroes it's easier, some it's not. But either way, most junglers are melee, meaning they can't reach those wards. Now here's a little trick too. You can actually ward the middle part there. If you get a running jump and stick it on up top, no melee hero is ever going to be able to hit that, except for maybe Clary with her double jump, but that thing's on a like 17-second cooldown, so it'll take a long time for her to clear. Now, one thing to point out is that wards have vision in a radius around them instead of just through line of sight like humans would. You can't see through walls or around corners. These wards in Paragon, they can do that because they see everything in a radius, a giant sphere basically, and they're the center. So you see this enemy harvester here, that's because our ward that we just put on that rock wall can see it because it's on the other side of the wall. We would also be able to see any enemies standing on the harvester to collect the amber from it. And while we're on the subject of the orb prime pit, let's say hi to the big guy. Hello. Now using that same logic that I just told you about, you can actually put a ward behind the pit and the big guy himself, and you'll still be able to see him even if you're not in the pit, or if you don't have wards in the pit. So you can see his health bar right there. We can see his health bar, and now we can see him. Now we can't see him, now we can. You get the idea. Right lane is a lot like left lane in the sense that you only have to ward one side of it, the side where the jungle intersects and turns into the lane itself. You can just ward the little pathways like left lane, or you could also ward this black buff here. Black buff is a very important buff for your team to have because it lets you take down towers, inhibitors, and enemy harvesters a lot faster. Depending on what you want to see, that's where you should place your ward. Ideally, you'd want vision of both the enemy's jungle and black buff, so I would recommend putting your ward about here, because this gives you vision, just barely anyways, of black buff, and it gives you a little bit more heads up of the enemy jungler when they're at their white camp. If you want more vision about the enemy jungler and don't care too much about black buff, you can just ward right next to their white camp, or better yet, you can go even deeper into their jungle if you think you're safe enough and ward on this little ledge right here. This will give you vision of both the white camp, red buff, the surrounding area of red buff, and the shadow pad or pool, whatever you want to call it, to your left. It won't give you the vision of the entire pool, but it'll give you about half, which is plenty enough to see the enemy coming. And if you just want vision on black buff, this little spot between left and mid lane is perfect. Now let's move on to warding the enemy jungle. I just showed you the little ledge area, but I'll show you again because it's so good for warding both red buff and the enemy white camp, along with half of the shadow pad that's right next to the red buff. Just put it up here, put it a little bit closer to the edge, but not too close because you can still jump up and hit it if you're melee. It won't give you vision of the second white camp, but you can just put a ward in the shadow pool, preferably one that's closer to the white camp, and you'll be able to see both red buff, anything in the shadow pool, and the white camp. It'll also give you a good indication of the enemies in the area around it. Now let's move on to blue buff. So let me just run over there real quick after getting this harvester and hopefully dodge this Gideon. Nope, okay, I'll just jump out. Oh, no, got sucked in. Let me... I've died twice to bots. As Kalari, no less. One of the hardest people in the game to kill. It's not okay. Before I forget, there is one more spot on red side that I should tell you about after the harvester. Those first two wards won't tell you about the enemy coming through the closest pathway to middle lane. So you're going to want to drop a ward right about here because this will give you vision of both the white camp and this pathway that leads to mid lane. Also, it'll give you vision of this cool little loop pathway that leads to a stealth pad near the top of mid lane. So you could actually gank someone from behind here like this and they would never know. You could also throw one in the stealth pad, but it won't give you vision of the pathways down below. It just barely hugs the wall. So I recommend putting it in this little intersection or just in the pathway itself, giving you the most vision possible. Oh, that's a free kill. 1 second. There we go. Got him. Alright, let's go to blue buff for real now. Let's take a trip to the enemy's blue side buff to simulate the fact that we're invading their jungle rather than me just running around my own jungle, which might help you guys understand a bit better visually. So like I said before, you can ward the shadow pad or right above it right here. Oh, Fang Mao, please, I'm trying to make a video. First Severog and Gideon, now you. This isn't cool, man. Thank you. Like I said, you can either ward in that shadow pool, pad, whatever you want to call it, or you could ward right above it. This won't give you vision, direct vision into the shadow pool, but when people notice that the shadow pool doesn't turn them invisible anymore, they know automatically that you have a ward in there, so they know to clear it. This way, you can still see into the shadow pad and most of the surrounding area without having to alert the enemy jungler that there's a ward there. Now, if you make a right after crossing the prime pit, instead of going straight through that little cutout in the wall, you'll enter this shadow pad and you'll be closer to the enemy's blue buff. You can put a ward right down at the bottom of this path. I recommend putting it a bit to the left or the right, that way they can't stand in the pad and see the ward. This gives you vision of both blue buff, the surrounding area, and a little bit of the shadow pad. It doesn't quite give you vision of the white camp, but it's still pretty useful. Another trick with blue buff is you can ward on the ledge right above it. It's similar to the ledge on red buff side, only instead of it being to the left or right of red buff, it's directly behind blue buff. Now let's go into a little more detail about warding the prime pit. As I showed you guys earlier, you can ward right behind the prime buff against that wall to have vision on him, or you can just throw a ward into the pit itself by standing in the shadow pad on the blue side of the jungle. This way you can see both the harvester and the orb prime buff. Alternatively, you can just ward the enemy's pathway into the prime pit by warding either their shadow pad or right below it. This will give you vision of both their shadow pad and the prime pit without letting them know that you have a ward in that pit. I put that first one a little too high, so I'll put this one a bit lower, maybe just on the floor. What was that? Oh, that was Murdoch's ult. But you get the idea. And one more time, I'll show you guys again this little trick. You can put it right here on the ground behind it, or you can jump and put it on the wall. A little trick I figured out, if you get a running start in auto sprint, and you jump at the right time, and place your ward at the right time, you'll actually put it on top of the ledge, making it basically impossible for melee heroes to hit. And rangers can't shoot it from inside the prime pit. There's no real benefit to doing it this way or just on the ground, but I think it's fun. The last thing I want to go over here are defensive wards. People who play against Kallari don't tend to ward that often because they don't buy wards. If you buy shadow wards, you'll be able to spot Kallari while she's invisible. So if you're down an inhibitor, put wards in your base or along these pathways, depending on which inhibitor is down, only one or both, to prevent backdoors or sneak attacks from Kallari. This will also give you a bit more vision of your jungle, so you know if it's safe or not to roam around and take harvesters or collect camps. That's backwards. Take camps, collect harvesters. There we go. But other than that, that's basically all there is to warding in this game, guys. Like I said, I'll make a different video on the shadow plane and invisibility. But until then, thank you guys for watching. I appreciate it. My name is Joe, and I will see you guys later.